Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for coming along to today's webinar regarding your questions about COVID-safe planning. Just while everyone's coming online, I'll just kick things off. My name is Anton Zytnik. I'm the acting manager of the Health, Safety and Wellbeing team, and welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us today. So just a few technical points about the webinar today before we kick it off. We're going to be running today for 1 hour, give or take. My colleague Alex is going to post a link in the chat function in Zoom to the participant workbook for this webinar. So we've prepared a workbook where you can take notes against the slides if you wish to. So that's a link you can download the workbook from our website, which we'll post in just a moment or two. And everything that we refer to in the webinar today around websites and resources and things like that, they're also linked to in the workbook. Now, this webinar we're running today will take a question and answer format. So any questions that you have along the way, please feel free to use the Q&A function, which you'll see in Zoom, to pose your question, and we'll get to it hopefully during the Q&A. I anticipate today that we're going to have a lot of questions, and we perhaps are not going to get to answering all of them. We'll do our very best. Anything we can't answer throughout the course of the day, we're going to create some written responses to and upload those written responses to our website along with a recording of this webinar in a couple of days' time, and you'll get a notification when they're available, so you can read those responses and also share them with anyone else that you think might be interested. Thank you also very much to those of you who have pre-submitted questions when you registered for this webinar. Very helpful, and again, we're going to get to as many of them as we can in our Q&A. Okay, so I want to introduce our panelists today. So, as I said, my name is Anton Zytnik. I'm the acting manager of the Health, Safety and Wellbeing team. Today I'm going to be more in a moderator role, and Michelle Gunn and Phil Lovelock are going to be our main panelists. So I'll just get Phil and Michelle to come online. Thank you very much. Starting with Michelle, if you could just give a little bit about your information about your background, Michelle, and how you come to be here. Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody for coming, and thanks Anton. My name's Michelle Gunn, and I'm the director and founder of InSafely, and I am an infection control consultant, and I am helping businesses implement infection control measures into their workplaces, as well as providing customised COVID-safe plans. My background is actually a qualified and trained dentist for almost 15 years.
Okay, thank you very much, Michelle. And Phil.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Yes, Phil Lovelock is my name. I've been with the Chamber for around 12.5 years. All in all, I have around 30 plus years exposure to workplaces and workplace health and safety. Yes, I've been having a look at COVID-19 since it came to people's notice, and it's something that I think we are all going to have to deal with for some considerable time to come. When COVID normal comes around, whenever that is, it will be very nice indeed, I think, for us all. Quite a relief.
All right, thank you very much, Phil. Now, a bit of an overview of how the session is going to run today. I'm going to start with a very quick legal update with just where we sit currently in the middle of October 2020. What are the basic requirements that every Victorian business needs to keep in mind? I'll keep that very brief. Then we're going to spend about 30 minutes on our Q&A with Michelle, and this is where we're going to get to some of those pre-submitted questions that you submitted when you registered for this webinar. That'll take about 30 minutes. Then I'll give a brief overview of the support that is available through the Victorian Chamber, and then we'll have about 20 minutes toward the end of the hour for some open question and answers. So these are the questions and answers that you'll submit as we go through the webinar. I'll pick some of those, and we'll bring Phil into the discussion and answer as many of them as we can get to in the 20 minutes, and then those that we can't, we'll try to get to with a written response when we upload this webinar. Okay, so just to kick things off, I understand that we're all going to be here today with varying levels of knowledge about this topic. For some of you, it may be a fairly new subject. For others, you're already well familiar with COVID-safe planning, and you're here more as a check against what you're actually already doing. Just to make sure we're all on the same page here, 4 main points I want to share. It is mandatory for every Victorian business to have a COVID-safe plan. My colleague Phil tells me that there are still references here and there on some websites about not needing a COVID-safe plan if you have less than 5 employees. That is not the case, certainly not according to WorkSafe Victoria. Every single Victorian business as of around mid-September needs to have a COVID-safe plan irrespective of size. And also some a tracking mechanism, so a workplace attendance register. So if there is an outbreak at your workplace, that effective contact tracing can occur, and there's templates available for both of those, the plan and also the template on some of the websites I'll share in a moment. Compliance is something we need to be aware of as well, so spot checks are underway in both Melbourne and regional Victoria. And also if you're a business that has multiple work sites, so for example, an office here and a factory there and something else somewhere else, you need to have a COVID-safe plan that takes into consideration the specifics of each of the sites that you actually operate. So the authoritative source of information that we should be referring to on this is the coronavirus.vic.gov.au website. The link is there for the subpage on COVID-safe planning. This is where you will find general guidance about how to create your plan and general Q&A and templates and things like that. The other subpage on this site that is certainly worth having a look at is the industry restriction levels page. The one I have up here on the screen is for metropolitan Melbourne, but there is a similar page for regional Victoria. And this goes through some essential information we need to know about what the restriction levels are specific to your industry, what classifies risk versus high risk, and also those 6 principles around which COVID-safe planning needs to be based. Physical distancing, wearing face masks or coverings, practicing good hygiene, keeping records and responding quickly if there's a case or a suspected case in your workplace, avoiding interactions in close spaces, and creating workforce bubbles. So those principles are all spelled out on that particular subpage. Worth a look also is WorkSafe Victoria's dedicated page to COVID-19 as well, and this is where they go into more detail about your obligation to report cases of COVID-19 and also industry-specific recommendations, which is certainly something you want to have a look at, guidance from our own safety regulator. So they're the main points of information that form the basis of what we're going to talk about today. They're the main facts and the main websites that we recommend that you have a look at if you haven't already. I'm sure most of you probably already have. So what we're going to do now is get to our Q&A with Michelle. And over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to look at 10 questions that you've kindly submitted during the registration process for this webinar, and we'll spend a couple of minutes on each. Please, as we're going along, submit your questions during the Q&A, and then we'll get to them when we bring Phil online for the open discussion in about half an hour's time. So thank you, Michelle. We're going to kick off with a bunch of questions that essentially relate to safety in the office. We had a whole range of questions relating to office safety, and let's start with the first one. If I'm working in an office on my own and it's sealed, do I need to wear a face mask all day?
Well, it's a great question because I think the answer most of us will be expecting will actually be incorrect here. But the answer is yes. If you are working by yourself in a sealed office, you will need to wear a face mask in keeping with one of the COVID-safe principles. But I would like to highlight with this question, if you are working in an isolated office with no one else around, can this actually be done from home? Because if it can, then we need to still keep workers working from home.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Michelle. So, when I saw that question as well, I was puzzled by the question in the sense that, if you are working in a civil office all day performing computer-based work, why are you there in the first place would be the question. Yeah, so that's good answer. Okay, the second question here about customer service representatives. This is more broadly applicable to anyone really who spends the majority of their day on the phone. So if you're call center or something like that, can they take their masks off during the day while on the phone?
Well, again, we're keeping in the principles here of wearing of masks, and staff, including customer service representatives, shouldn't be taking their masks off while on the phone, or really at times on a work premise, but small breaks can be taken when deemed suitable. I really think the only reason to be taking off a face mask when talking directly to someone, maybe when that person may be hearing impaired and require reading lips as a way to communicate.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but the general principles here around mask requirements still apply.
Yeah, and including call centres, they're also all supposed to be wearing masks all day.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that, Michelle. Would that question also fall in a similar zone to the first one, where if we are doing predominantly phone-based work, to consider, can that work be done from home if practicable?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's our number one principle. If you can stay home and remain working from home most of the time, do it. And I think, we will see that change in shift going back to work, is that, the full-time office situation may not actually apply anymore. People may only go in for 1 or 2 days a week and then do most of the other work at home, where they can speak on the phone without a mask at their own work premise or work office.
Okay, Michelle, thanks for that. Now, this one, the question number 3, which I suspect is going to lead us into some conversation about workforce bubbles and things like that. We have an open plan office, which is very common. Many people do. Desks about 1.5 meters apart. How do we apply the 4 square meter rule in these kind of contexts?
So I think this question really refers to the physical distancing, and I will just quickly touch base on that, if to bring everybody up to speed, that there are 6 principles are needed in the COVIDSafe Plan, and that includes the physical distancing, the wearing of masks, the good hygiene, keeping records, acting quickly if a worker becomes unwell, avoiding working in closed spaces, and the formation of work bubbles. So part of this being in an open plan office, desks will need to be 1.5 metres, which they're doing, and this arrangement, if possible, should be that the staff aren't facing each other. Your density quotient will still apply, and that's that 1 person per 4 square metres in each enclosed space, and staff will need to continue to wear masks at all times. Now, there are other things that your workplace can consider, and that may be that installation of barriers or screens might be an appropriate measure. But I do like to highlight that if any additional measure is being placed, we don't miss the basic principles of infection control, and that's that 1.5 metres, and all the other principles there. It may be a good time or a good opportunity to discuss cleaning in this situation. Whilst I'm not sure if the desks in this situation are shared or if they're individually allocated, desks do need to be routinely cleaned, which really implies daily, but definitely they would need to be cleaned in between shifts. And I really like to apply a traffic light system here, whereas a green desk is to say, hey, this is clean, ready to be used. Orange is to say, this desk is in use. And then red is to say, this desk has been used, hasn't been cleaned, and is requiring cleaning before being used by somebody else.
We'll switch to the focus of safe travel. So this is obviously a question that's going to be on the minds of many staff when it comes to physically relocating back into workplaces. how do I get there? What can the employer do? To what extent is the employer responsible for safe travel? If you could talk to that for a few minutes, Michelle, that'd be great.
Yeah, look, as far as I'm aware, there are no real new regulations that apply any differently today than before COVID in terms of ensuring staff get to work safely. However, we do know that the travel to work will be changed significantly. Firstly, carpooling is not recommended, and this is actually a requirement of not to carpool if your industry is operating under a restricted or heavily restricted step at the moment. And when they sort of open up, I guess, if there is going to be travel together, certainly the wearing of masks in that enclosed space. Secondly, I think public transport has been quite a concern for people. And public transport is actually opening back up this week. And they are implementing a lot more infection control measures across the network. For example, you've got your cashless top-ups, the ability of having, or the availability of having hand sanitizer and much more frequent cleaning services. But as an aside point, I think really it's going to be years before that we can ride on trains without masks. I think that's going to be a key thing. And so if we're wearing a mask on the train to go to work, then I think something that businesses should have a think about is that perhaps we should have a facility, we remove that mask when we get to work in the appropriate way with the hand sanitizer and have a new one put on, whether it's another fabric one or a disposable one, just to minimise any issues associated with that. But I also think that one of the most important principles that applies to all workers is emphasising the need to stay home if they are unwell, and that the employers are supporting the staff to remain home, even if it's the mildest symptoms, because that's the biggest thing that the employer can do to protect staff, give business, and the community in general.
Okay, yeah. Again, it comes back to those things we touched on in the earlier questions, that challenging the need for someone to actually be in a work environment if the work can in fact be done from home. There's an obvious linkage there. Okay, so just to move on to a different industry, just to segue, we've got an interesting question from a participant who's hopefully online with us today, who was asking about events and venue safety. You know, obviously this brings us into the topic of workplaces that are also open to the public and not just our employees. If we're running some sort of venue, we can interpret that as we wish. What are some of the things that employer needs to be aware of, not just in terms of their own employees, but also the safety of the public as well?
Yeah, again, it sort of applies to all industries really, that the COVIDSafe Plan is based on these 6 principles that I keep, referring back to. But with an event or a venue industry, we will have certain extra protocols like increased cleaning, frequency of communal shared spaces like the toilets, high touch surfaces, door handles, etc. will need to be really addressed in this situation. Now, the government has actually released, as of this month, an industry restart guideline for most industries, and this is some guidelines that are providing a lot more clarity and simplicity for each industry. Now, it is taking time, and so not all guidelines for each industry are out yet. In regards to the venue events industry, obviously this is a huge category and can be further subcategorised, whether it's into the arts and creative space or whether it's outdoor attractions. And so you need to really refer to that industry restart guideline that applies to you. I know that there is the LEIF, which is a live event industry forum that has been set up in June this year in response to COVID-19, and they're working alongside all live events and performances, whether it's sports or music festivals, etc. and they're trying to standardise a COVID sort of safe plan for that industry. And I guess there's events that the Premier constantly touches on when there are changes to our roadmap, such as weddings and funerals, and certainly information can always be found on the coronavirus.vic page associated with that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a good lead into our next question, because a lot of the discussion we've had so far, a lot of the questions do relate to employee safety. One of our participants asked an excellent question about that the information seems weighted toward what to do in the event that an employee is unwell. How do we handle situations where we know or suspect that a member of the public has become unwell after visiting our premises? What sort of support and information are we likely to expect from DHHS?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's really spot on that at the moment there's a lot of guidance around employers and employees, but this is one of those contingencies that will need to be in your COVID-safe plan. And it really comes down to that record keeping within your workplace, how you're registering visitors within the workplace, whether you're looking at driver's license to check name, address, and that's all there to facilitate contact tracing. I really see over the next few months, to years, that there'll be an emergence of those QR codes within a lot of workplaces to help facilitate this sort of tracing. But to sort of go on about particularly this question, look, the customer or client, they may get in touch with you if you've got a close or personal relationship, but it wouldn't be appropriate to be calling them and trying to trace them and see their movements around your business. So, come down to really the records that you're keeping. And I do think with the ongoings at the moment in Kilmore and Shepparton, probably there'll be more clarity over the next coming weeks on how we manage a situation where it is a customer or client that's been potentially spreading COVID-19.
Just a related question here, Michelle. I know from our previous discussions you've done a lot of work with organisations who do have that, that customer interface on a constant basis. Can you give any examples of work you've done or where you've seen this done well in terms of that managing risk around public attendance on a site or a venue?
Yeah, so I guess it ranges. I've done a bit of work with, certainly in the music, getting back into that creative space, and that can be really done without any hassle to anybody attending, because it's at the moment that 10-person coming to an activity outside, and so the owner of that business can keep track of that without any problems. In the retail or hospitality industry, we're really looking at ways to do this electronically, and it's preventing that touching of the pen and having hand sanitizer and, eliminating steps that can be really automated in the workplace. So I've done a little bit of work with businesses in hospitality where they're actually implementing those QR codes. And they don't need to do anything too special, but yeah, that's certainly one way to manage that.
Okay. All right, thanks, Michelle. Just moving on to question 7. Are COVID-safe principles still going to apply to the COVID-safe plan when we enter a COVID normal state, whenever that may be?
Yeah. Hopefully sooner rather than later, but it does seem to be a bit of a way off. But I would say yes, they are going to apply, and the purpose of the principles is that they're going to be around for a long time. And I'm saying long time, that really years. We're not talking about months, we're sort of looking at years. But the specific measures under each principle will change over time, whether it's not having to wear a mask in a solo office, but masks remaining on trains. What we know, and if you spend as much time as I do looking at the guidelines in COVIDSafe plans and templates, there are some guidelines already made by the government, let's say for the hospitality industry. We know when they finally reach a COVID normal, there'll be no density quotient applied, but there will still be a requirement to keep records. Because these measures will remain over a long time, I really like to have a chance to emphasise that put in place a robust COVIDSafe plan and effective measures from the start, because then it's much easier to wind these back as regulations change, rather than always scrambling to get them in place. And many of the measures that you put in place are going to probably be quite permanent changes anyway. So it's worth implementing anything with that in mind.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Michelle. I think all of us here, we all come with the desire that this is done and dusted as soon as it possibly can be. We all wish that to be true, but I think the reality that's dawning on all of us is that the kind of measures we're talking about now, putting in place, they're going to be in place for the long haul. And I certainly agree with that idea that it's better to invest some time now, get them right now, rather than be in a state where you've got a problem and you're trying to scramble to fix the problem retrospectively. I mean, the same is true of general safety planning. It's always best done proactively rather than reactively, no matter what the topic is. And this is certainly a topic that's going to be with us, as you say, for some time to come. Question 8's, I think, related in some ways to questions 5 and 6, in that we also have a question around training in educational institutions where we've got our employees, we've also got third-party visitors to our site that may not be members of the public, they may be students or clients. Can you talk a bit to the experience you've had in that industry and any recommendations specific to training and education?
So I think the training and education can be broken up. If we're looking at institutions per se of where you can go to get further training, I think even the Vic Chambers have had, you've publicised this, but there are accredited infection control training courses run through the TAFEs of Victoria, or RTOs, so registered training officers. And these are really to get, or really for people who have a customer-employee interaction. If we're looking at the training and education in the workplace, it probably falls onto the employer, and there are a list of many things covered in the COVID, like the principles, what all employees need to be trained upon, whether that is appropriate ways of cleaning and understanding the difference between what's cleaning versus disinfecting, and high touch surfaces versus routine surfaces, wearing of masks. So I think education and training, it covers a lot. So yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks for that. Okay, 2 more questions, and then we'll talk about the support available from the Vic Chamber, and then go to our general Q&A. I can see already from just looking at both the Q&A and the chat box, I'm going to preempt with everyone now that we are certainly not going to get to all the questions. We have so many. We'll do our best, and as I say, the written answers will be there when we publish the webinar in a recorded form. So question number 9, if we do have an outbreak, what do we do? What are the first actions?
Well, I like to refer to our COVIDSafe action plan, okay? But and so we've got these scenarios anticipated. We go to our folder and we put them into place. But essentially, your first step is to contact WorkSafe, and they will start that process, including communication with DHHS. Now, there are so many scenarios that or steps to go into for this, but I'll attempt to outline the main steps or the thinking around a positive COVID-19 case within the workplace. But we'll break it up into, okay, let's identify who is this person or possible people with a confirmed positive. Is this person an employee, or is it a customer or a client? Within your workplace, where has this person been and when? and who has this person been in contact with within the workplace, and what sort of interaction have they had, meaning are we starting to classify this into a close contact situation. And obviously with these two last points, it's really coming down to those records that you're keeping, your rostering of staff, how, is that up to date? Even your staff contact details, is that up to date? Who's come into the business during this particular time? Now, there are a number of different documents to help you achieve this, and there'll be a number of documents that will need to be sent to DHHS to assist with this situation. But if you have this plan in your COVIDSafe plan or action plan, then you can just follow it step by step in a calm sort of manner without, getting too,
Panicking.
I guess, freaked out by it all.
Yeah. Again, it's a great example of when to have the benefits of having the plan in place up front, because if you don't, you're going to be running around panicking, as opposed to, okay, this has happened, refer to the plan, implement the plan, and deal with it in a much more calm and professional way than you otherwise might if you didn't have something in place.
And I think that's really important, coming back to how you manage it, because you don't know if your cafe or your business is going to have somebody that walks in that happens to be positive. But the way that you manage it is going to be really important for your business's reputation, and you spent so many years building up your reputation that, people are understanding that, you can't necessarily help who comes through the door, who possibly, is infected. But the way that you manage and go about it, are you in your plan going to call, your staff, or you can actually text them and that might be appropriate? Or is that actually, would you think your staff going to prefer a personal call to say, hey, this has happened, this is our go, rather than receiving a text message, for example? So, you've got to think about how you as your business want to manage it.
I mean, the reputational damage can be immense, because if within your local community area more broadly, you're the subject of an outbreak, and the way that you handled that becomes scrutinised further on down the track. You don't want to be in a situation, obviously, where your response was haphazard or chaotic, or you didn't have a plan in place and clearly preference commercial arrangements over doing what you should have done to limit that outbreak. So good point. You spend years building up your reputation, but only a few poor decisions to knock it all down in a short period of time is obviously what we want to avoid. This last question was an excellent one. I'll be very keen to hear your response to this one. Part-time staff, casuals, people working for multiple employers in multiple different suburbs. How do we treat these sort of situations?
Yeah, I agree. It's an excellent question. And I really think that this question shows that you've identified the risk to your business. And that's probably the most important first step in managing this. Secondly, it's important to know which staff are working in other jobs, and where that is. It's wise to keep records of this information when your staff has disclosed it. And it is a requirement in the restricted or heavily restricted industry. The purpose of keeping those records is if there's a cluster or outbreak, we have the ease of ability to aid in that contact tracing. But if this is an issue or a concern, I think we need to look at the COVID risk within the community, the risk to the industry or the industries this employee is working in, and that specific role type of the employee. And the measures may vary from, can they still work from home? Work from home. There are some situations like in aged care that workers are not permitted to work at multiple sites. And whether or not you look at a workforce bubble that minimises that interaction with these employees with others. And I know that Bill had a good point that, possibly you're breaking up that time, not working back to back at at different places if that's a possibility, just to see how things are going. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. So been going right on time for about 30 minutes or so. What I'll just quickly do now is just talk a bit about the support that the Victorian Chamber is able to offer. I'll get Michelle to jump in and sort of expand on these points as we go through. Now, we've got about 200 people on the webinar today. Some of you will have very simple requirements, and you may listen to what you've heard today and think, yep, we're on the right path, we'll go away and do it. Others of you may have more complex requirements and require support. And what I've been taking away through this discussion with Michelle is just there are so many questions, and the need for customised planning on a business-to-business, industry-to-industry level is clearly very evident from the just the complexity of possible scenarios that we've talked about today. So we are here to support businesses, and Michelle is our lead consultant in this area of helping businesses develop and maintain their customised COVID-safe plan. Michelle, could you just talk to these points here on the slide a little bit about how this all works? Then I'll talk to the pricing in the next one.
Yeah, sure. So basically, InSafely, what we do is we come to your business. Now, often this is by virtual tour, and depending on the business type, we'll go through your business from a employee perspective, as well as potentially a customer or client perspective. We will work out what infection control measures you may have placed, and we definitely understand that every business is at their own level of maturity. Some businesses have got some hand sanitizer out the front, and that's as far as they've got. Others have implemented everything under the sun and just want that reassurance that nothing's been overlooked or missed, and that independent review. So we also just ensure that everything is compliant and you're meeting the regular, standard regulations that is required. And we write a customised plan for you, a COVIDSafe plan, and this really will exceed the requirements so that you can wind things back as you choose. It also provides within your plan how you're going to train staff, whether it's in masks and what you need to cover, so that element is also included, as well as having this action plan with a number of different scenarios. And this is, again, customised to your business, to your staff. And we give you an opportunity to review that before we finalise that report. And so our aim really at InSafely is to educate, on infection control measures, integrate, so you can integrate them into your business or workplace without any stress, headache, and to automate, because COVID, unfortunately, is going to be here for quite some time. And you don't want to be thinking of it every few months, or every, changes are going to be needing to be made. But if you've got the backbones to everything and a good plan, then you can easily take away and bring things in. But yeah, we want to automate as much as we possibly can so it becomes routine, so that when you've got customers or clients, it's not clunky. It's like, come to our business. This is our business. Everything's running smoothly. We're back open. Yeah.
I think as well, we talked earlier about competitive advantage as well, and the businesses who have this done and it's evident to their clientele that they have it, they've got their themselves in order in this area, are going to have a competitive advantage over those that clearly do not, and people will vote with their feet and clearly express preferences for going to that cafe or that shop or whatever it is, if they understand that the business has a robust plan in place, not only to protect their safety as a client, but also the safety of their staff as well.
Yeah, and we look at the tips and tricks for your industry too. Like think of, if we're looking at your hand sanitizer, where is that position? Have you got kids that are coming in? Can they reach it, or is it going to squirt straight into their eyes,
Yeah.
with those automated things. Well, that might not be your best hand sanitizer to get, but if your clients are or adults, no problem. So, just sort of working out what's appropriate for you in your business as well. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Michelle. Now, with this consulting work that we are offering our members and clients, of course, we'd love to offer some fixed pricing, but that's not realistic given just the diversity of businesses and their needs that we have. I think that's pretty evident from the discussion today. The rate for consulting services in this space is $260 per hour plus GST. That is the member rate. Michelle, could you just give us a rough idea, though, of, obviously a complex business with multiple sites is how long is a piece of string question, but for a fairly simple business with one location, could you give us sort of a ballpark estimate on how many hours like an end-to-end customized COVIDSafe plan would include?
Yeah, well, it's an aim to really be doing in that to probably 3-hour mark when it's a one-site business with, I guess, fewer than 5 employees. But it's around that 2 to 3 hour mark, and that includes your on-site visit. And I'd say that generally takes anywhere between 40 minutes to 60 minutes. Often there might be some follow-up questions because virtually it can be a bit tricky to see if you've got that closed lid bin somewhere over the behind a toilet or wherever. So we do often have some follow-up questions afterwards. But to formulate your plan, everything, and then time to go through it and make any amendments if need be, I'd say it's around that 2 to 3 hour mark.
Great, thanks, Michelle. So if you require that support and you want to get in contact, plenty of ways to do that. You can give us a call, give us an email, or else shoot us through an online inquiry, and we'll get back to you. Our Workplace Solutions team will get back to you and talk about your needs and just work out how many hours are required, put a proposal forward in the way that we normally would do with our members and clients. So we've got about 17 minutes left. I want to bring Phil into the discussion now as well, and we'll go to some of the general Q&A that I've received, both in the Q&A box and the chat box. And just to preempt again what I said earlier, we are not going to get to everything. I do apologise for that. There are just dozens and dozens of excellent questions, but we will commit to answering all of them and collating some. There's no doubt some that are similar in a written form when we upload a recording of this webinar. So, Phil, I'm going to throw the first one to you, actually, and it sort of builds on a theme that I spoke earlier about with Michelle. What a few questions coming in about workers who work at multiple sites. I'm looking at this one here about contract cleaners, and this, I suppose, relates to any contractor who is doing work at a number of different premises. Who owns that risk and who manages that risk when we have contractors who are coming into our business but working across multiple sites? Could you speak to that?
Yes, certainly. We have to remember that when we bring contractors into our workplace, those contractors are our employees insofar as how we can control what they do. Now, with cleaners, they are there to clean the work site. They are there, hopefully, to properly clean it in accordance with your requirements for your site, such as high-risk areas with door handles, toilet doors, push buttons in toilets, those sorts of things, all need to be thoroughly cleaned and regularly cleaned, probably 2 or 3 times in a day. The cleaners should be wearing all of the relevant PPE, face masks. They should also be wearing gloves and the like. Once again, however, the employer would need to talk to the contractor, the manager or the owner of the contracting company to ensure that they are properly undertaking their cleaning and that they are properly managing their staff between business to business. One of the issues has got to be travel between one business to another, and how they do that, whether they wear face masks, how are they sanitizing themselves, all those sorts of things. So it would, in my view, require the employer and the contract manager to sit down and work out what's happening, and then the employer can determine whether they should continue with that contractor or not.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Michelle, I'm going to throw a separate question your way. With a few questions that have come in around employee gatherings. So we're coming up toward the Christmas period. This is normally the time of year where we get together as a team, have some sort of Christmas do or get together, which is obviously important for morale in what's been a very demoralizing year for many people. What are your thoughts on how that may be handled, Michelle?
I think it's really going to come under the social gathering situation at this stage, where you can meet in a public space of up to 10 people. There's no actual guidance that DHHS or the business.vic have released regarding this, but I think certainly it would come under the social gathering clause at the moment.
Okay, all right. Question I'll throw to Phil, and then Michelle, I'll get you to jump in as well. We had a question come in from a charter bus operator who I hope is still with us online, who's pre-submitted this question, has also put it in the Q&A. We can expand this question as well to look at any operator who's not just operating a bus, but any sort of space where capacity is naturally limited. What are your recommendations for a bus operator or a similar kind of employer who obviously wants to get back to as a maximal capacity as they can as soon as possible, but they're, the place of work is not an office, but it's something which is more confined. Could you speak to that, Phil?
I sure can. The rules, the principles are still the same. You still need to have people 1.5 meters apart, and you still should have them, each person having 4 square meters. So when it comes to a bus, for example, then you would need to ensure that people coming on board are staggered in the seating, they're not seated together, and you maximize the amount of space that they can have. Now, I understand that this could be seen as being unprofitable to some organisations, but they're going to have to follow through until such time as the current restrictions are eased, if indeed they are.
Okay. So Michelle, I might just bring you in on a different question with that one. I'm just mindful of time. I've got about 10 minutes left. I want to get through as much as we possibly can. Questions around temperature checking. There's obviously been some discussion in the context of schools here, but where do we stand in relation? And Phil, jump in as well if you'd like to. After Michelle's answered, where does business stand in relation to the pros and cons of temperature checking?
Yeah, so temperature checking's been quite a hot topic in the last couple of terms as kids went to school, came back from school. It's continuing in ELC and kinders at the moment, but schools aren't doing it at the moment. Temperature checking can be sort of a great scene measure to be effective, but it's not very effective to prevent COVID. If you've got a fever, then it may or may not be due to COVID. And there can be some medications that lower your temperature anyway or can increase it. So, the reading is important. The COVIDSafe Plan is suggesting for businesses to consider implementing it. And if you do implement it, You'll need to do it before your staff come into work, ideally. And you need to have a plan. What if that temperature is 0.1 of a degree off normal? How are you going to manage that? Okay, and so, you know, you need to have a protocol set up. And I think in some businesses it's fantastic. I think with kids it can be fantastic, because if you do a lot of work with children, sometimes there can be a barrier for a mum or dad to take someone to a prepaid class if they're a bit iffy that their kid is unwell and they know that a temperature is being taken. Okay, I'll leave them at home, and because I know Jane's going to temperature check my child. But from a business point of view, it is at a great additive measure, provided you're doing all the basics and you have a really good plan in place with how you're going to implement temperature checks, because otherwise it's just going to become a big mess of what we should do. Because what happens if your staff has a fever, you have to, and you should have a scenario for that anyway, but you need to manage it.
Your thoughts, Phil?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that looks good, and it makes people, especially in large office buildings, think that you're caring about them, but it is not overly effective as such. And you have to consider that you or I could contract COVID-19, but it might be 2 or 3 days, in fact, before we actually register a fever, if indeed we do.
If at all, yeah.
So,
and actually...
to me, it's not an overly effective thing, but as I say, it does look good, and it does sort of show people that you're trying to do something. But once again, to follow up on what Michelle says, if you do it, then you do need to have a plan in case something does pop up. Yes.
Okay, great answer. Just a question that came through in the pre-registered Q&A as well as the chat here. What about a business who during the lockdown has transitioned to a working from home arrangement, and everyone is working from home, or maybe even pre-COVID, they were just a completely remotely based business? Does a business in that scenario need a COVID-safe plan if there is no plan to return to any sort of physical co-location? Michelle, your thoughts on that?
So sorry, that everybody's working from home?
Yeah, everyone's working from home, and that's going to continue.
Yeah, no, you don't need a plan, technically, from my understanding of that. But, you know, if you are going to get staff to, you know, have a Christmas party or something, then, you know, that would need to be part of it, having a COVID-safe plan for that.
I think also if you're a large-ish office or even a small office and you have somebody going in there regularly to pick up mail, that sort of thing, then yes, you have to have a COVID-safe plan.
Yeah.
Even if there's only one person going in. But if they're working from home, no.
That's right.
Yeah, so it would only be in a scenario where it's a completely remotely located business with no real estate, no mail, nothing in the physical world, which some businesses are, but that'd be the exception, I would imagine.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. I'm just flicking through the other questions here. Interesting one here that I was very curious to hear your perspective on. What do we do in situations where we have staff who have been directed to work from home? So let's imagine the working in a closed office all day by myself situation, and we've said to that staff member, look, if the work can be done from home, it should be done from home. What do we do as an employer in scenarios? I'll put this in Phil's direction first. For an employee who is swearing black and blue that they want to, they need to, they must come into the workplace. If you could talk to that, Phil.
Yeah, if they must. If they feel that they must go into the workplace, I think I would be asking why they feel they must be doing that. And it might be access to files or you know, access to computer, might be computer issues, those sorts of things. I would be questioning the employee to find out why, and it may be that they feel that they are unsafe working from home.
Mm.
Domestic violence has increased with people working from home, so they might feel that that's an issue for them. So you'd have to talk through it with them, find out what the issues are and try to manage those issues. But if you decided together that yes, that person should go back into the workplace, then you'd have to put a COVIDSafe plan in place first.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Phil. Next one I'll throw to Michelle. We've got a few minutes left. Time for a few more questions. Excellent questions come in around the use of shared facilities. So we might have a business where you have, say, multiple tenancies in the same location that may share bathroom facilities, reception area even is quite common. What if one business has a COVID-safe plan, but the other co-inhabitants of that space are dragging their heels? How would we approach that sort of situation?
Technically, if they're back, they need to have a COVID-safe plan. Like it's
if they do, but it's just not as effective as it could otherwise be if they haven't engaged your services, for example.
Well, I think in those, we can start off really in those shared spaces that whenever there's a shared space, there needs to be a cleaning log. And that's, the first phase of doing that. And basically, I don't actually know the legal requirements if that will be one for you, Phil, if someone's a little bit slow on the uptake of that. But yeah, shared spaces need to have a cleaning log, and they'll need to be done much more frequently. And so frequent replies to is to a day. But if you've got a large number of people using toilets, using a reception, then it should be done more.
Your thoughts on that, Phil?
Yeah, I think it actually goes further than that. I think the building owner, perhaps the leasing agent, etc. I actually think that they should be putting in place a COVID-safe plan for their building. Now, each of the businesses within that also need to do their own, but by the building owner or the leasing agent putting in place a COVID-safe plan, that should be circulated around amongst all of the employers that are occupying that office building. And as Michelle says, it should include a cleaning plan, because you could have quite a few, 10, 15, 20 different people working from offices within that building. So and there'll be visitors coming in and going out. There will be a reception area there. So the opportunity for COVID to go rife throughout that building would be very high, in my view. So therefore, I think everybody, including the owner, manager, would need to put a COVID-safe plan into place and focus on the cleaning as well.
Yeah. Okay. Now we've got about a minute to go, and I want to throw the last one to Michelle. A very easy one for you from Melanie. Can Michelle please restate her 6 principles?
Yes, no problems. They're the COVID-safe principles. It's the physical distancing, the wearing of masks, good hygiene practices, and so that includes the cleaning component, keeping records and acting quickly if a worker becomes unwell, minimising working in enclosed spaces, as well as the final one, the formation of workplace bubbles.
Could I just say one more thing?
Yep, please.
The recent government announcement stated that face shields cannot be used. I must say that they can be used, but you must also wear a mask.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we're right on time. We're going to finish up now. Thank you both very much to Michelle and to Phil. Great answers to a lot of very complex questions. As I said earlier, we are going to do our best to answer any questions we couldn't get to in written form and post this with a live recording of the webinar. So if anyone's missed the first part of it, they can access that later on. I'd also like to point you in the direction of our resources for business page as well. So on the Vic Chamber website, we've got a whole bunch of resources there that Phil has been diligently updating that you can avail yourselves of as you wish. They're excellent, so please visit that page. And other than that, I'd like to thank everyone who attended and for your excellent questions and interactions. It's been a very informative session. And stay tuned, you'll get a notification about when the recording of this is being posted, along with the written responses to any questions we weren't able to get to today. So thank you very much, and we will see you all next time.